Three. Okay, everyone. Kind of having an impromptu interview in the middle of my workday here. David Shurter, who's been so kind enough to allow me to interview him, he is an SRA survivor. He's actually known Fiona Barnett for a few years now, 3 years. They may have even known each other as little children, but David Shurter has been one of my primary sources for exposing Antonin Scalia, the Supreme Court justice who passed away because David Shurter was brutally raped by Antonin Scalia when David was just a small boy. And so David's graciously allowed me to be able to interview him and just kind of talk about that and discuss this up with him. So David, thank you for being on my YouTube channel. And I just want to give you sort of the platform at first and just kind of, if you could just share some of your background, what your childhood was like and kind of just where everything started for you being in this satanic ritual abuse environment.
Hey, thanks for having me. I was born into this. My family, I have 3 older siblings. My oldest was 16 years, then 14 years, then the youngest of my oldest siblings was 12 years. They were already heavily involved with it when I came around. I was born. My mother went into labor with me Thanksgiving night. They parlayed my birth until December 6th, 1966, because they wanted the 3 6s in my birth date. And I was born into this cult, and they convinced me as a child that my purpose in life was to be a vessel that a demon was going to inhabit, and that I was to become the Antichrist. And so I went through horrible, horrible abuse. My dad was a pilot at the time, and so I have been at the Bohemian Grove a lot as a kid. Fiona and I have only known each other as adults for about going on about 4 years now. We've worked together, but we could have, because our ages are so similar, we could have known each other at the Bohemian Grove. I was in the MK Ultra stuff at Offutt Air Force Base. That was where my MK Ultra training was, and then we were doing satanic rituals at Hummel Park. This was all in Omaha, Nebraska. My family was heavily involved in what is commonly known as Franklin Credit. All of those people were my parents' friends. At 10 years old, a man showed up looking for his daughter. My stepmother drugged his iced tea. They drug him down into the basement. My dad, at night, my family got together. My dad doused him with lighter fluid, and my stepmother forced me to throw a match on him. It sounds horrible, and let me tell you, it was totally horrible. But really, God works in mysterious ways, because I wasn't drugged, and it wasn't part of my MK Ultra training, and it destroyed my programming. I ended up having a psychotic break at 13. Because all of this stuff was coming up. Then I kind of moved around. I lived with my dad and stepmother from the age 3 until 18. I came down to Omaha to take care of my mom. Because Franklin was so heavy. I graduated in 85. So the end of 85, the beginning of 86, I went to Omaha. People from the cult reached out to me, but even though I kind of knew, I didn't really recognize them, because I was a kid when I was involved, and they had grown older. So I was involved with a lot of the stuff that was involved with Franklin till about the age of 20. It started breaking loose in 86, 87. And my mom sent me, I had gone to live with my mom when I was 18. to take care of her. And she sent me down to Florida, bought me a bus ticket. I now realize at the time I was really irritated because I didn't want to leave Omaha, and I thought my mom was trying to be the motherly type, and I didn't know her as my mother, even though, I mean, obviously she was my mom, but she didn't raise me. But now I realize that she was saving my life, sending me down to Omaha. All my whole circle got decimated. Two of my friends got busted as pedophiles. I never saw them with kids. It was a complete setup. Another one of my best friends was murdered, shot in the face. So I kind of spent a lot of time trying to get my life back in order. I got heavily involved in trying to expose this in 2006 after my dad died. My dad actually, I wrote him a 12-page letter and told him that he was dying of prostate cancer at the time. And I told him, dude, do you really want to go see God with this on your shoulders? And he actually started to come clean, but nobody listened to him. He was telling people that he had committed crimes against kids, and was trying to come clean. He ended up dying. And so because of my faith, the sins of the father fall upon the shoulders of the son, I kind of picked up where he left off. And I've spent the last 18 years or so trying to get this investigated and get it exposed. I've written a book, which is called Rabbit Hole, Satanic Ritual Abuse Survivor Story, that you can find on Amazon. I have a blog, which is just my name, davidshurter.com. That's SHURT as in Tom, ER.com, where I have years and years and years of everything I've gone through and everything I know. For those of you who, I mean, my publisher hates this, but in the pages above, there's a link that says the extended version of Rabbit Hole called Confessions of an Antichrist. If you want to read everything I wrote in detail, that's the book. That's what I suggest people read. Rabbit Hole did get nominated for Book of the Year. It was my first book ever, and it was nominated for Book of the Year.
Wow.
But with everything that they cut out and everything that they added, Rabbit Hole is only about 63,000 words, whereas Confessions of an Antichrist is about 130,000 words. And so I've been trying to expose this. I've done countless interviews. I had a YouTube station. I'm on Twitter. I've just, really, I've done what a Fiona has done, is I've tried to actually expose this. And now I'm kind of trying to expose this, but at the same time, trying to help survivors, especially survivors who are just now getting a voice, to gently help them start talking. Daniel, you have to just interrupt me because I can go on. I mean, I'm my mother's son.
I was just trying to make sure that my computer screen doesn't go dark here on me. Basically,
Okay.
I want to ask you more. First of all, a lot of my listeners may not even know about the Franklin cover-up and scandal, but this scandal, and you can speak more on this. I mean, this implicated Bush Sr., did it not?
It went straight up to the Bush Sr. White House, Bush Sr. and Reagan White House. The national media was talking about the child prostitution that went straight up to the Bush White House.
Right.
It dealt with, and it wasn't just Republican, even though in the 80s it was primarily Republican. There were Democrats that were involved too. Barney Frank, he was a Democrat. He was heavily involved with it. And so it kind of encompassed a lot of people right now want to make it a partisan issue, and it's not. It's a bipartisan issue. What we're talking about is a lot of rich people who are making a whole lot of money trafficking kids. And it's still, I mean, obviously it's still going on heavy, and it's starting to explode. The 80s, people might remember, older people, younger people won't, but older people will remember that there were two words that were used in the 80s: satanic panic and false memories. That was all given to us by the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which was a CIA based group of parents who had been accused of satanically ritually abusing their kids. The only one who wasn't, who was on the board, was Ralph Underwager. And I have an interview that he gave with Patica magazine on my blog in the pages above. You can read where he said that children having sex with adults was good for them, and that we needed to lower the age. I mean, they've talked about lowering the age to 3. You know, it's good for a 3-year-old to have sex with an adult. That's the kind of arguments that you get. And I mean, I listened to you and Jason in your interview, and I was really pleased when you guys went and made a big point of, it's better to tie a millstone around your neck and throw yourself into the ocean and drown yourself than to hurt a child.
That's right.
And so the Franklin case was in Omaha. People might remember what made it go away was the McMartin case, which was a preschool in California, longest and most costly court trial at its time. That ended up with no convictions. And so that made it in America all go away, even though McMartin was one of 7 preschools in the area alone. There were allegations coming out in Omaha, there were allegations coming out in Atlanta, they were coming out in Philadelphia, they were all over. But what is notable is that at the same time it was coming out in all the places in America, it was also heavily coming out in Australia and the UK as well. And so this was worldwide, and there was no internet at the time. And survivors were all saying the exact same things. We were all saying the exact same abuse allegations. And so unless you think that there was something in the wind that went global, obviously where there's smoke, there's fire. And there was a lot of smoke.
Yeah,
raging fires.
I've tried to make this point with a lot of people who say, "Oh, come on, how come you believe this person or that person?" But you know, any prosecuting attorney who knows anything about the law, when you have a variety of witnesses who don't know each other, who are all saying the same thing, and their testimony remains unchanged over decades, and they're all from various locations across the earth, hello, that's called a preponderance of evidence, and it's indisputable, and it's completely admissible in a court of law. So,
well, a good example of this whole situation is that when Fiona's documentary Candy Girl came out, she and I didn't know each other at the time. And we met right as her video was just getting produced. She had already done all the filming. And we met right before she released Candy Girl. Well, I had done a documentary myself 4 years previous, but the guy that did it for me was a filmmaker. He does filming and stuff in Hollywood. And we had filmed 4 years previous, but he hadn't put anything together. And I hadn't pushed him. So when he saw Fiona's, he decided to do mine, which is David's story, a satanic ritual abuse survivor story, which can also be found on YouTube. Okay. And if you watch her video and you watch my video and you realize that we didn't know each other at the time, mine was filmed 4 years before hers was filmed. And even though, I mean, obviously the situations are slightly different.
Right.
She's a female, I'm a male, she's in Australia, I was in America. Our stories are remarkably the same. I mean, we're saying the exact same thing. Right. And so when people think, you know, how could you just have to look at those 2 videos side by side to realize we were going through the same stuff. She was talking about the Bohemian Grove. I was talking about the Bohemian Grove. She talks about Billy Graham and Richard Nixon. I was talking about George Bush Sr. and Anton Scalia and a myriad of other people. And so this was the very rich, the very well-connected, and the very powerful people who were involved with this.
So tell us a little bit more about how did Antonin Scalia meet you, and what was the context in which he started basically using you as as a sex slave.
Anton Scalia was part of the cult that was killing kids in Hummel Park. And I have a video out describing Hummel Park. I don't necessarily suggest people watch it because I was so angry at the time that I'm very angry. But I'm working with Out of the Gate, and I have part 1 and part 2 of my interview out there. And now we're getting ready to go through and do one all about Hummel Park. And she's actually going to use that whole video and have me re-narrate it because I'm way not angry anymore.
Right.
When I filmed that, I had just been coming out, and I got attacked. I mean, boy, when I came out, the attacks are bad now, but I was less used to them when I first came out. And so we're going to go through, but Anton Scalia was part of the cult at Hummel Park that was killing kids. And it wasn't just him. It was very, very powerful people, all kinds of people in Omaha. PJ Morgan, Willie Thiessen, who built Godfathers. He's the founder of Godfathers. Warren Buffett was there. I mean, there were some high level people there.
Right.
And Anton Scalia stood out in my mind because he was very, I mean, yes, he raped me, but what is notable about me with him is that he was sadistic at the same time. I mean, he not only raped me, but tortured me while he was raping me. So when he died, I came out full force and was talking about him. And I took a lot of heat because a lot of these people had the appearance of being these great guys. You know, Fiona's had to deal with the same thing with Billy Graham. And so it's just, that's the whole thing is that when we were kids and we were going through all of this, we were told that no one would believe us. Everyone would think that we were crazy, and they'd all think that we were liars. And to a degree, they were right. It's just that with Pizzagate coming out now and all this other stuff, just now there's so many people involved that now people are starting to realize that survivors have been telling the truth. And we all have a lot of similar stories. I mean, a lot of us have the similar stories, and we don't know each other. And a lot of the stuff that I've talked about is not in books. You know, you can't find anything of what I'm saying anywhere other than from me. There's touches on it. I mean, Franklin, the good guys of Franklin aren't really the good guys. John DeCamp wasn't a good guy. Ted Gunderson wasn't a good guy. These are the heroes of Franklin, and what they really were controlled opposition.
Right.
And so we've been fed a bunch of BS for so long that it's hard to ascertain what the truth is and what's not. And when you have people like me or Fiona Barnett, or, I mean, there's a myriad of us out here that have been speaking for a long time, and just getting people to listen has been hard. Before you would start talking about this, and you would get this blank look on people's faces, and their eyes would roll back in their head, and you realize that you lost them. But now with Pizzagate and all of the stuff that's coming forward, now people not only don't do that, but now they engage. Now they ask questions. They want to know more. And that's God right there. God is answering his promises. Everything that's been hidden in the shadows is being drug out into the darkness finally.
Yeah.
And so
I would say, just based off what you're telling me, you're encouraged then by what's happening, that you see a definite shift in terms of an awakening toward this topic.
I am tentative. You know, I don't want to get my hopes up because I've seen this happen before and then get closed down. The 80s was a big time that I saw it get closed down. But this time seems to be different. It doesn't seem to be going away. It seems to be building in intensity. And not that there's not still a lot of controlled opposition, but I mean, it's written in the Bible that God would use their own stuff against them.
Yeah.
And so they brought up Pizzagate thinking that it would be able to be dismissed. And Pizzagate didn't get dismissed. There were a lot of people who were just like, okay, wait a minute, there's something wrong here.
Right.
And so they started to investigate it. And so now I have a little bit of hope that things are, I have actually a lot of hope. I really do see God's hand in all of this. And we were told as kids that nobody would care. And I have to say that I'm starting to realize that was a lie, because people do care. They care a great deal.
Yeah.
And
I've heard Isaac Cappy, and I've heard Fiona, and I've heard a couple others, Tiffany Fitzhenry. They said, we might have remained asleep had they not touched the children. But as soon as it started spreading that this was going on to little children and even babies, and that it was sodomy, it was cannibalism, it was all this stuff, it's like, that's just a red line that, even as apathetic as the American public has been in the past, I mean, I definitely have seen that it's aroused me. It's aroused a lot of people all across the nation to say, whoa, this cannot continue. This just cannot continue. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of, and I know you've only known Fiona for about 3 years, but your relationship with her, and are you guys able to sort of build each other up and be a support group to each other when you're facing all these attacks and stuff? Or talk a little bit about that.
Oh, we are. She and I talk almost every day. I mean, there may be a day in between where we don't talk. It's really hard as a survivor of this not to start getting low. She's helped me a lot. I feel that I've helped her as well, but I have a tendency to, I spent a lot of years hating God. I blamed God for everything that happened to me, which is funny because I blamed God and hated God, but Jesus Christ was my best friend. That's what got me through. Really, all of this was that I was really focused on the New Testament. To be quite honest, I went as a young kid, a teenager, and started reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I started reading the teachings of Jesus Christ. And I didn't start reading them to actually learn the truth. What I did was that I went into it to try and tear it apart. I was trying to find any flaws that I could to rip it apart. And what I found was that Jesus Christ's teachings are flawless. I couldn't argue with anything that Jesus Christ taught. And so that's what really started to get me a little bit more peaceful, definitely brought back my faith. And so, but in the years that I've known Fiona, there have been times, because I'm getting hit with directed energy weapons constantly. They're starting to come out. I've published the new NBC News article that was written in 2006, where the Air Force went in front of Congress and said these weapons existed and that they were going to use them on American citizens to show the rest of the world they were safe. I've shown the actual Air Force documentation proving these weapons, but especially they really started hitting me hard. It's been 24/7 since a year ago last March. And during that time, Fiona has had to deal with me, because there have been times that I've had conversations with her where I was just yelling over the phone. I don't know why God is putting me through this. I don't know why I'm being allowed to suffer. And yet it hasn't brought me down. I haven't gotten traumatic brain injury like the people in Cuba, the embassy workers in Cuba and the embassy workers in China had. I haven't even been sick during this time. And I just really say that it's God. I mean, the only thing that has pulled me through this is God. But Fiona has really had to deal with me because there have been times that I've just lost patience and been really upset, and she helps bring me back to my faith. She's not the only one in my life, but she's a big one
Yeah.
because she has such a strong faith.
Right.
And I have faith. I mean, I trust in God. I just get angry because
Yeah,
this.
that's understandable. Even when you're reading the Psalms, they're emotional. David has times when he's angry and he's pouring himself out. So I definitely understand. And in terms of what you're having to go through, I mean, obviously I haven't gone through anything like that, but I do know that sometimes I ask God, why do I have to go through such and such a thing? And I don't understand it at that point. But then later on, I look back and I think, oh, that was because I had to I had to draw closer to him and try to make sure that these things draw me closer. But definitely will be praying for you about these
But
weapons.
we were never promised it would be easy, just that it would be worth it. And not only were we not promised it would be easy, just the opposite was true. We were told we were going to go through hell.
That's right.
And so faith, unfortunately, goes hand in hand with suffering. I mean, it's just.
And I think a lot of people.
That's just the way it
in
is.
America, in other parts of the world, they seem to understand this, but in the American church, that's a real hard thing to swallow when you have all these false prosperity preachers who now we are learning are actually cannibal baby murdering pedophiles themselves, like Kenneth Copeland, and Billy Graham. But they preach this prosperity, and where you look at the scriptures, and just like what you're saying, Jesus said, if they hate me, they're going to hate you. And Paul said, hey, just so you guys know, one of the first qualifications of being a believer, you're going to go through a lot of suffering. Just want you to know that. That's part of the good news. And
Jesus Christ not only did not preach a gospel of greed, which is what this prosperity gospel is.
Right.
He preached just the opposite. He preached just the opposite. Was build your treasures in heaven, because they can be stolen here. And so this whole prosperity gospel is just another way of them. But you have to understand, these Luciferians, their focus is exactly what the fallen wanted. And if you remember, when the angels fell, their boast to God was that they could turn all of mankind away from God.
Yeah.
And so that is this whole rituals of children and hurting children. This is this whole promoting sex, promoting death, either through war or through abortion.
Right.
I mean, I just am not. I try not to actually get into the whole abortion issue because I am a man. And I will also let everyone know that I was, whether or not it was because of my abuse or not, and my sisters think it was my abuse, I identified as gay. But I will also tell you that I have been celibate for 8 years. And it's not because I'm a self-hating gay man. It's just because I have faith. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being gay, but I just don't want to live the lifestyle. My faith, we all have crosses to bear. And so my faith.
The scriptures do say that homosexuality is an abomination, but the fact that you're choosing to be celibate and to live, on a higher plane, I think that speaks volumes, particularly with, and I also want to address something else too, because I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. You people who criticize me when we talk about like these direct energy weapons, or I had another woman that gave me her testimony about some of the technology that was being used on her when she was being trafficked. You have to understand the military, what they show us is like 50 years behind what they actually have. So the fact that you can't see it with your own eyes doesn't mean, because I hear this, people say, oh, he's getting hit by direct energy weapons. That's just science fiction. No, it's not, guys. It's not. Okay, David Shurter, Fiona Barnett, these are very intelligent people. I'm a reasonably intelligent person. These are not made up things. This is reality. We have to begin to understand that this has all been hidden by the cabal and the satanic pedophiles that have been running things. David, could you go ahead and speak more kind of about, what are some of the, I guess, positive things or things that you try to do now in terms of healing and trying to, I mean, obviously I know you have times where you get angry or whatever, but what are some of the kind of positive things you try to do to kind of not only let people know about what's going on, but also just living a healthy life, spiritually and mentally and everything like that?
Praying is, I mean, I can't reiterate that enough, is that prayer is a big thing to my life. I God is part of my life for every minute of every day. I don't think about God just on, Sundays. I wake up thinking about God. God is with me all the time. And I pray a lot. Fiona and I pray on the phone almost every single time we talk on the
Oh,
phone.
good.
We always have prayer. I do volunteer work. I work with a lot of old people, just because giving to people is, if you're at home feeling depressed and thinking that your life is terrible and that you're just unlucky, go volunteer. Go help someone who is needy. Do what we are told to do and live the word.
Amen.
Chances are when you go out, you will find someone who has it worse than you do.
Right.
And helping them actually does a lot to lift the spirits. I counsel a lot of survivors. Not so much that I'm not a counselor for them, but I understand what it's like when you first start coming out, dealing with the emotions, dealing with the memories. I talk a lot about it. The biggest thing that I would reiterate is that it is said, Jesus Christ said, faith without works is dead.
That's right.
You have to live the word. You have to do whatever you can to live the word. Help those who are in need and don't focus on money. I mean, I'm destitute, broke, disabled with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I make about $760 a month. That's what I live on. And though I never have an abundance, I always seem to have enough, but that's the focus is, really living the word. It's, eating healthy. Now, I will say that I watched you and Jason and realized that eating pork is probably not in my best interest. I knew that kind of, but hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah.
And when you're really poor, especially in the Midwest, you buy a lot of pork because it's really cheap. It's the cheapest stuff. It's way cheaper than beef or chicken. And so, but really just focusing and trying to get and praying, realizing that, God does love us. He's not going to make everything go away. He's not a fairy godmother. He's not going to grant our every wish. But we are, right now in America, especially, people have kind of made God out to be a fairy godmother and kind of distorted it to where he serves us. And
right.
The biggest thing is that God doesn't serve us. We're supposed to serve him.
That's right.
And so
that's right.
Trying to do the best that I can and serving God, celibacy has been the best thing for me. I don't even think in terms of, sex anymore. And in America, that's a big thing.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's promoted everywhere.
Saturated the culture is. I always see that sign, God bless America. And I always think, well, what about if we made a sign that said, America, bless God? You're exactly right. The focus is on, in American community, the focus is on, oh, God, what can you do for me? When really it should be, well, what can we do for God? How can we please him? How can we help him? And you're right. The best antidote for depression, you go out and you serve people and you serve God, and you will find that happiness comes when you're actually pouring yourself out for God first and foremost, and for your fellow man. And that's why the Messiah said, if you lose your life, you're going to find it. But if you're always just looking for your life, you're going to lose it. And it's that paradox that's really, really missing, I think, in today's Christianity. And maybe that's the reason why, because I know Fiona's talked about this a lot, and others, and you have, and that is, when you do talk about people like Billy Graham or Antonin Scalia, people are like, oh, don't touch the Lord's anointed. Don't you dare say anything wrong about Billy Graham, because Christians are, I mean, not all, but a lot of Christians are asleep. They look at these idols, Billy Graham, and they're not serving God. And Billy Graham didn't even preach anything close to the right gospel. He taught a greasy grace that basically all you had to do was say a little prayer and you're in the kingdom, which is not what Jesus taught at all. And yet they're somehow shocked and surprised that he was a serial pedophile. Can you share a little bit more? And I know this was probably when you were younger, but how did you, because you were in Omaha, Nebraska as you were growing up, how did you wind up in California at the Bohemian Grove? Did they transport you over there through government planes, or how exactly?
Yeah, my dad was a pilot. My dad was a pilot and had his own plane at the time.
Okay.
And so we flew there. We flew there and actually dealt with it. I dealt with the child sacrifices under Moloch, which I was taught was an owl. And the other thing too that's interesting, might be interesting for people, is that Moloch is female. It was more of a female deity than it was a male deity.
Oh.
The thing that I remember the most about Bohemian Grove, and I think it's just because of the trauma, is that smelly pond that's right in front, because there's this like man-made pond lake thing that's in front of the statue that you rarely ever see, because they always focus it on all the stuff that's going on at the statue. But there's this nasty smelling pond that always stunk really bad. And that was one of the things that I remembered the most. I went through the child where you ran through the forest, and it was sort of a hide and seek where if they caught you, they murdered you, and so I dealt with that. I dealt with child sacrifices, which isn't really hard to really fathom when you consider that publicly they burn a child effigy every year at the Bohemian Grove. So thinking that they're doing child sacrifices isn't really that big a leap. It's just that what most people don't realize is that they focus on that 1 week where everyone gets together. But that's not when the child sacrifices are happening. It's off season, right, when there's not a lot of people there. I never knew it when it was full. I was never there, right, when it was all full of people. And so my dad, we flew there because my dad had a plane. Again, this was all under the age of 10. Sacrifices, drinking blood, what happened even at Hummel Park, but also at Bohemian Grove. Every time we had the blood ritual and everyone drank the blood, I ended up getting gang raped. And so there was just, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And that's why when Alex Jones came out with that thing, there is no way he and a group of video people got through to Bohemian Grove.
Right.
Because Bohemian Grove, the front of the Bohemian Grove, there's actually 2 gates. And if you get through the first gate, they will shoot you and they will shoot you dead. Legally, they can shoot you dead before you can even get close to the second gate.
Right.
And so there's no way he got involved. There's no way he snuck in. The only way he could have gotten in with the camera crew is if he was invited.
Right.
Because they just don't play games. This is the most coveted secret place ever. But it's much like what was happening at the Bohemian Grove is exactly where that ranch was that Scalia got murdered at. It was in the middle of nowhere, 150 miles away from everyone else. Only rich people go there. it was full of all of these crazy statues and all of that. And again, Alex Jones took credit for exposing that ranch, but I'll have everyone know he wasn't the one who exposed that ranch. Yes, Washington Post wrote an article about it, but Washington Post wrote an article from something I published on my blog a week before. That ranch and the exposure of that ranch was all Fiona Barnett. She was the one who found all that information. Yes, it was an article that I wrote, but it was only because Fiona found all the information and sent it to me and asked me to write an article about it.
Right.
So it was Fiona Barnett who busted that ranch. You know, she's the one who found all the information.
So
and if you look back,
yeah.
Well, if you look back, you can see the date on my blog of the article that I wrote about that ranch, because she called it Rent Boy Ranch. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I wrote was Fiona's, you know, she was helping me write the article. I just sat down and wrote it because she didn't have time at the time. She didn't have the time at the time that it all happened.
Right.
And, but if you compared that date compared to the Washington Post article when it came out, Washington Post didn't come out with it until a week to 10 days after Fiona and I worked together to publish that article. And so all of that Rent Boy Ranch stuff, all of the stuff that came out about that ranch, all originated from Fiona Barnett.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. And Alex Jones, I really had a problem with him when he acted like he was pretending to investigate Pizzagate, and then he makes this big show about how he now realizes that Pizzagate was fake. I mean, to me, that just showed me that Alex Jones, complete fake and shill. But I did not know that about Fiona Barnett, that she was the one who, that's amazing. Thank you for reporting on that. I was going to ask you, do you have any idea what happened to that 13-year-old boy who in self-defense killed Antonin Scalia?
No, I found the information out from Dave Valentine. Dave Valentine was an old school investigator who just happened to be down there at the time. And that's how it got out, was that they had a child, a 13-year-old child in custody. Dave Valentine wasn't the one who said it was a boy. He said it was a child. But because of my personal experience with Anton Scalia,
right,
I knew damn well it was a boy, because that's what he liked, you know. And the boy ended up, there was no pillow over Anton Scalia's face. The boy slit his throat. And obviously it was a setup, because how did he get a knife? How was he able to get a weapon who did that?
You've said that Antonin Scalia is very sadistic. I'm wondering if the judge himself brought the knife in to do some sort of sadistic sexual stuff, and somehow that 13-year-old boy wrestled the knife out of his hands. That's what I'm thinking now, based on your testimony.
It could have been. Yeah, it's very possible that it was because, again, God said he's bringing them down by their own hand.
Right.
And so that's the reason why they didn't do an autopsy. That's the reason why they rushed for his burial. That's the reason why the family didn't want an autopsy, because even in death, you can't hide a slit throat. And so it could have very well been, because that was Anton Scalia's MO. I mean, he liked to hurt people, so it could have been a knife that the boy wrestled from him and got the drop on him. And so it's very easy.
Yeah, this is putting a lot of pieces together now. I'm running up against a time limit because I have to get back to work, but I just wanted to conclude the interview by just asking you, do you have any advice that you would give the audience of what they can do in terms of helping to expose this issue, or taking action outside of the internet to make people more aware of this topic, and to hopefully stop this practice as much as possible?
Talk about it, because we're in the time that we are. Halloween is and it is the most important Luciferian time of the year. They are getting kids. And personally, I would never let my kids go out trick-or-treating. I mean, that sounds terrible, but we tell our kids not to talk to strangers except the day that we worship the devil. And then we send them all to strangers' houses. You know, it doesn't make any sense. I tell people, you know, actually talk to people about it, try and get the exposure out of it. Pizzagate, a thing about Pizzagate that irritates me is that now it's all focused on, oh, the Russians hacked those emails. So we're so focused on, oh, the Russians hacked those emails, never realizing that if those emails were actually hacked,
Right.
that means those emails are actually real, you know, and we need to know, we need to have a focus on what's in those emails, not where they came from, but if they're, obviously if they were hacked, they're real. And so, and really focus on your communities. And for those of you who have kids, be genetically connected to your kids. Know who they're dealing with, know who they're talking to online. Do not just, because the pedophiles are in your house. They are already, you don't have to worry about pedophiles in a park or a mall. I mean, you do, but the big problem is that the pedophiles are already in your children's house because they're on social media.
Right.
They are heavily involved in the computers. So really get in touch with your kids, know what's going on with your kids, talk to your kids, and really keep your eyes out because it's everywhere. I mean, this is not just one community. This is everywhere. It's in rural areas, it's in city areas, it's everywhere. And so really focus on your kids' lives. Keep your eyes out and keep your eyes open. And let the Holy Spirit guide you. If there is something that feels wrong or something that you feel compelled to do, then obviously don't be a villain. I'm not asking for people to be vigilantes or anything like that. Right. You know, follow what we were given as the word. You know, you're not to hurt each other and all of that. But if there is something that you see that bothers you, you know, making an issue out of it is not a bad thing. Calling the police, it doesn't always work, but you know, it's something. Going to schools, if you see something, talking to the school officials, especially with your kids, you know, get involved. Do not turn a blind eye, and don't try to, if you see something and the hairs go up on the back of your neck, don't look away. Don't tell yourself, oh, it's not my place, because it is our place. We are to look out. The least of what you do to me.
Amen.
That's what our Father said. And so really get involved and be involved in the community, and most especially be involved in your kids' life, because we are in the scariest time of the year. Halloween is the Luciferian Christmas, basically.
Yeah, and I've asked people, and I've gotten probably about over 100 people that have responded. But on October 19th, this Friday, as many who want to, we're actually setting that whole day aside to do prayer and fasting for specifically praying against the high places of darkness and spiritual devils that are preparing for Halloween night. And so what we're wanting to do is just through praying and fasting and just interceding, praying that as much as possible, Satan's plans are completely disrupted on Halloween night. Because like you said, it's the biggest satanic, satanic ritual night of the year. And so we as believers, we have this power.
And prayer is,
we have this power.
Prayer is a big thing. And get together with people. I mean, 2 or more. It only takes 2 or more. When you're gathered in my name, 2 or more.
Right.
And so pray with people, and do not be embarrassed or intimidated because you have faith and you believe in Jesus, the teachings of Jesus Christ, and you believe the word.
Amen.
Stop being intimidated. You know, The devil and his followers want to intimidate us, and it is our time to not be intimidated. We have to take a stand in this. That's just the way it works, is that we have to take a stand. And there's no lukewarm to this. There's no fence setting.
That's
because
right.
Jesus Christ said, the lukewarm will be vomited out just like all the rest.
That's right.
We have to get involved. We have to take a stand. And that's just the way it is. It's, you know, is it fun? Is it fair? No, it was never promised it was going to be fun. It was never promised it was going to be fair. But in the end, we are promised that it is worth it. And just remember that, you know, and educate yourselves. Just educate yourselves. Go find the pedophile symbols because they're hiding this out in the open. So go find the pedophile symbols and, you know, don't let your kids eat at Voodoo Donuts. You know, stay away from Voodoo Donuts. Stay away from all of that dark stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
there's a lot of practical things we can do, just like he's saying, and coupled with prayer. You know, just my personal testimony, when I first started this, within the first few weeks, my fiber optic cables were cut twice. And finally, a friend of mine and I helped do some research, and we found that I'm living just down the street from a Masonic lodge. So we just started praying, and we just prayed against this Masonic lodge. I have not had any problems with my fiber optic cable since then. So we really do have this power, guys. We don't have to be afraid. Just like what Dave was saying, we're living in a time now where God is expecting us to be either hot or cold. But this lukewarm thing's not going to work anymore. And so it's time to take a stand. That's where we're at right now. We've got to take a stand, and we need to make sure we're on the right side of this war. Because I tell you, and David and I were talking about this before we started the interview, there's a lot of people out there that are supposedly exposing pedophiles, but they're attacking Fiona and David and Michael Whalen and all these guys. You know, people like Craig Sawyer down in Arizona, the guy's a fake. And there's so many fakes out there. And you can just tell them, you can tell by their fruits, because they're attacking legitimate SRA survivors like Fiona Barnett and David Shurter, who, guys, these guys have been around the block. They've been saying the same thing. Their testimony has remained unchanged, not for a year, not for a couple years, for decades. Decades, David and Fiona have been talking about this stuff, and their testimony has never once changed. So David, I appreciate you very much for being on the show. I think this is going to do a lot of good, to hopefully embolden people to be more forward about this. And I look forward to hopefully have you on again in the future.
Hey, thank you. Anytime you want. And once Fiona's feeling under the weather.
Yeah.
And so she's just, you know, feeling a little bit under the weather. So otherwise she would have come on, because I invited her to come on. Because
Awesome.
it's kind of interesting to get the two, you know, getting more survivors together and getting us, you know, so that people, it gives a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, we'll try
flair
to have both you and Fiona on soon. I'm going to actually have Aaron. I've interviewed both Amy Berger and Aaron Golub, who Aaron went through the underground tunnels in D.C., where he was molested as a small boy. And Amy has a similar testimony. I'm going to try to get, I've interviewed them both separately, but I'm going to try to interview them both together. So maybe we could also get you and Fiona on as well. Because I know that, again, it seems like every time I have an interview with an SRA survivor or someone that's investigating this, it gets more and more people awake. And I know I'm not the only one doing it. There's a lot of people out there like Liz Crokin and Tiffany's out there doing stuff. And I know Isaac Cappy, of course, he's been doing stuff, you know, for a while now, since July. But yeah, we'll definitely be open to that. And David, just know that me and my subscribers will be keeping you and Fiona in a lot of prayer, because we know you guys are going through a lot. So just know that. All right.
Daniel, thanks. What you just said, I couldn't hear a word because my phone rang, and I'm doing this on my phone.
Okay.
And so I can't hear a word you're saying.
All right, well,
so I'm just going to say goodnight.
Okay,
and I will thank you so much, and we'll do this again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Watch it when it gets posted. Goodbye. Shalom.